In this video, we're going to be looking at a couple basic commands and how to pull out specific columns that would be portions of the output of a command. So the first one we're going to look at is the get date command. You can see it brings back some pretty basic information: day of the week, the month, the number of day, the year, time, etc. So if I wanted to pull out a specific piece from this command and use that as a variable, that's kind of what I'm going to be going over today. So for example, if I wanted to pull out just the month or just the day, things like that, I could do that. I'm going to look at this in a little bit different format. So I'm going to pipe this to format table. What this is going to do is take this output and then format it in a table. So you can see that formatted a little bit different. We also have headers for each of the columns. So what those are named. And that is basically how I'm going to show you how to pull out a specific field. So for example, if I wanted to pull out day of the week, I could do that. If I wanted to pull out the number of the day, I could do that, and so on. So how I'm going to do this is, first, I'm going to set a variable using the output of the get date command. So I'm going to do that by setting a variable called date and use the get date command. So if I recall that variable, you can see it's bringing back the same output as up here. But I only want, for this example, the day of the week. So what I need to do is then go in and I'm going to use that date variable that we just set. However, I'm going to use that to set another variable called day. I'm going to use or set the day variable as using the output of the date variable that I just set, followed by a period, and then the name of the column that I want to pull out. So basically what I'm doing here is using this date variable that has the get date command, which is right here set. And I just showed you the format table, so I can easy way to get the column name out of it. And then I'm going to set this variable for day and use the output of the date variable that I just set. So the output of the get date command, but I'm only going to pull out the day of the week. I can do that. And if we recall that, you can see that it's just pulling Wednesday because that's the day of the week. I could do that with any of these fields if I wanted to in the same way. But for this example, I'm just going to use the day of the week. The next command I'm going to show you is another very simple one. It's the host name. All this command does is brings back the computer name of the device you're on. So I am also going to use the output of this command to set a variable. You would think that using host as the variable name would be a great idea, but that's already a variable that you can't overwrite. So for this example, I'm going to use device and set that as equals host name. If I pull that back up, you can see that it also brings back the same device name. One thing you may or may not have noticed is PowerShell is not case sensitive. You can see that I named this device with a capital D and then recalled it with lowercase d. Likewise, if I recalled it with capital D, it doesn't recognize case, so you're fine in the sense of that. So with that, the next command I want to look at is I'm getting some disk utilization on this computer. For that, I'm going to use the git ps drive, and that brings back a list of all the drives that are on this virtual machine. I don't really need all of this information for this this particular instance. I'm just going to focus on the C drive. So the way that you could do that is recall that command followed by what drive you want. So you can see that it now brings up information only on the C drive. This command's already formatted in a table, so you can see what the columns are named. So we don't have to look at that for what I'm going to go over, because what I want to do is set a variable with the command here as the output. And I'm going to call that, resize my window here because it's sliding out of the view. So recall that command just so I have it, and set a variable called drive. And if I call that variable up, you can see that it's only pulling for the C drive now, just how we did that last command. Like the previous commands we looked at, I don't want all of this information for a variable. I'm just going to use the used disk space for a variable, and I'm going to call that variable used. So like the previous example, we're going to name the variable, use the variable that we just set, and we're going to use the used column there and set that variable. You can see the format here is a little bit different. They use gigabytes up here, and it looks like they're using kilobytes down here. So that's not very user-friendly when you're trying to read it and understand how much disk space is actually used. So you can go up and use some methods for simplifying that. So what I'm going to do is recall that and divide it by megabytes. So you can see that it took that, divided it into megabytes, so it's a little bit easier. You could also do that with gigabytes. So even easier to read in this format. So the next thing I want to do is kind of take all of these variables that we set and write a basic output to the screen. So to do that, I'm going to use the write host command, and I'm going to enclose it in quotes, and I'm going to say as of day, which is going to pull that day variable that we set, which is the get date, and then extracting that day of the week. And then I'm going to say, so as of this day, computer, and then I'm going to use the device variable that we set that's going to pull that host name, and put is using the variable that we just set for the used disk space right here. And since the last one I set was in gigabytes, it should return gigabytes, and put gigabytes of the C drive. So what this should bring back is pop up a message on the screen that says, as of Wednesday, computer, then my computer name is using the used number of gigabytes of the C drive. And I'm going to go back here and put a space there. So you can see that it did work. as of Wednesday, computer with this name is using, well, it did not work. It did not pull the used gigabytes. So let's take a look at that. Interesting that it's not displaying that. Well, let's see if it likes megabytes. Nope, it doesn't seem to like that either. Let me take a look at what's going on here. All right, I paused the video for a second to see where my error was, and I quickly found it. I actually had a plus sign instead of an equal here. So it was doing the math of that equation using the used variable and the drive used. So it was basically doing what I thought it would do, but it was just displaying it instead of setting a new variable. So basically what happened was when it went to use this used variable that I had thought that I set, it didn't actually use it. So cleared that up. I'm going to copy and paste that and go in here. And you can see that now that I corrected that, it does display what I wanted it to. As of Wednesday, computer, this name is using 11 gigabytes of the C drive. So that is basically all of the commands that I was going to show you in this video. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.